Will this government last? What do you think? Do you see a shift of our stance when it comes to Pakistan because of a coalition government?
Not a diametrical shift, but the aggressiveness that we had seen in the previous regime, maybe that might be toned down.
It's considered that one of the reasons for BJP not doing as well as it expected it to do is because of the rising inflation, because of unemployment, because of the alleged economic distress.
The government of India's policies in terms of, let's say, controlling inflation have not led to reduction of food inflation.
With a full majority, the voter has understood that giving a full majority gives too much power.
Should Agniveer play a role?
I definitely
Should there be a rethink on this policy?
Definitely, yes. I'm of the strong opinion that there should be a reworking of this particular scheme. As such, in rural parts of India.
No. Vehemently no.
Why?
What is your wish list for this government? I'll start with you and then we all can give us. If the government is listening to us, this is the wish list of the educators of Unacademy. Sabath sir.
Let's start with you.
Okay, you put me on the spot.
And you agree.
You agreed.
Well, so same question to you.
First Chetan sir.
Okay, second I'll keep it very short, unlike a wish list. 3 wishes.
Everything related to economy.
Yes. That's the reason I said I'll not be repeating whatever has been said already.
So
of course, I also want.
His wish list.
I also want, let's say,
He
strengthening of
wants
the
that
democracy.
answer. He's not saying
a
it.
wish book.
He
That is
wants-
a wish book. Everything will be included within that itself. So now that all of us have basically listed all the wish list, Abhishek sir has written a book about the wish list. So what is your wish list for this?
To quote Faiz Ahmad Faiz, मुझसे पहली सी मोहब्बत मेरे महबूब न मांग. Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to episode 1 of Unscripted Conversations. The 18th Lok Sabha elections have been declared. The BJP has emerged as the single largest party, but it would need support of the allies, such as the regional political parties JDU and TDP, to form the government at the center. Will this coalition government, which is the first coalition government since 2014, that's what analysts are projecting, the return of the coalition era, will this coalition government last? What would be the implications of this coalition government on international relations, on our foreign policy, on our culture, economy, environment, politics, so on and so forth? That's something that we are going to discuss. All of us are here. We will have an unscripted conversation with each other. But if you're attempting Prelims 2024, please skip. There is nothing in this conversation for you. Please focus on revision, focus on your upcoming exam. If you're attempting 2025, then there is an interesting announcement for you. Unacademy, to celebrate the stupendous performance of its students in the civil services examination results, which were declared in May this year, Unacademy has dropped the prices, the course fee of its courses by more than 50%. If you're desirous of seeking admission in these courses to prepare for the civil services examination, the course fee for 15 months plus subscription is
$29,999.
I wanted to share right at the start so that it is of some benefit for you. Let's get started with this conversation, starting with Chetan sir. What do you think would be the impact of this coalition government on our foreign policy? And the first thing, will this government last? What do you think?
My personal sense is the government is going to last because for the past 10 years, under the Modi leadership, the BJP has had enough experience of managing different political pulls and pressures. So they should be able to continue with the coalition for the next 5 years, and they should be able to ensure that there is at least a stable government in place.
Does a coalition government have an impact on foreign policy in a sense? Would there be more continuity or there would be a change? For example, if you recall, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, it was a coalition government. A Commonwealth heads of government meeting was scheduled in Sri Lanka. But because the DMK, a regional political party which has stakes in Sri Lanka, it put pressure on Dr. Manmohan Singh's government not to attend that summit because that was scheduled in Sri Lanka. Right. And ultimately, Dr. Manmohan Singh had to skip it. Would you see a repeat of this under this coalition government as well?
During coalition rule, there is bound to be an impact on any aspect of governance, and obviously that would be there in the case of foreign policy as well. As you said, the example of the Manmohan Singh government, it was not just the Commonwealth heads of meeting, even at the UNHRC, because Sri Lanka was accused of committing human rights violations in the last phase of the civil war. And in the interest of maintaining our good relations with Sri Lanka, India was thinking about protecting Sri Lanka at the UNHRC. But at the last minute, the DMK, which was a major coalition partner, put a lot of pressure on the central government, and at the last minute, we changed our vote. We abstained from the voting itself, thus sending a wrong message to the Sri Lankan government. And this, in a way, pushed Sri Lanka closer to China as well. So something of that sort might repeat, but
where do you see that happening? Because it's not the DMK now, which has a connect with Sri Lanka. It's the TDP, which does not share border with any foreign country, or the JDU, which is not too interfering when it comes to foreign policy matters. Where do you see that happening, if at all there is going to be change when it comes to our foreign policy interactions?
You're absolutely right in this regard, that Andhra Pradesh, let's say, for example, doesn't share any such borders with another country. But look at Bihar. In the Terai belt, the Madhes issue has been a prime driver of India-Nepal relations. India has always supported the Madhesi cause, and India's involvement with the Madhesis has been a point of friction between India and Nepal as well. Nepal has often blamed India for interfering in its internal issues. So this is something that matters for Bihar, both for UP and Bihar. But in this coalition government, under the JDU, the interests of the Madhes people would have an impact on India-Nepal relations. Then another area where I would see a possible impact would be free trade agreements. Given the ideological difference between some of the coalition partners, possibly there could be some impact on FTAs, because under the Modi government, under the previous term, we have seen an acceleration with regard to negotiating and concluding FTAs.
But just to interrupt you, Mr. Chandrababunaidu is known as the first CEO CM of an Indian state. Don't you think that he would also be very much inclined in these FTAs if it benefits Andhra?
Yes, absolutely. Right now, Andhra would be struggling for resources given the reorganization which has happened. And Andhra Pradesh would be very eager under Chandrababunaidu to drive in more investments as well. So this is the pull. This would be the pulls and pressure of a coalition government. TDP might have its own agenda. The JDU would have its own agenda. The BJP would have its own agenda as well. So I think that's where there would be a certain degree of continuity in foreign policy. Of course, that has always remained. But when it comes to specific issues, it could be signing of FTAs, or it could be our policy towards Pakistan, or India's position at global organizations from WTO to the United Nations. So here the pulls and pressure.
So do you see a shift of our stance when it comes to Pakistan because of a coalition government?
Not a diametrical shift, but the aggressiveness that we had seen in the previous regime, maybe that might be toned down, because the coalition partners might bring that pressure on the BJP.
To go soft on Pakistan?
To go, not softer I would say per se, but at least to tone down the aggression in general. For example, if you look at the allegations of India being involved in assassinations, the government has been very aggressive with Canada, the way we responded to the allegations. So there, I think there might be a pressure from the coalition partners to tone down the approach of India, because historically Indian governments have been very moderate when it comes to our foreign relations. This newfound aggression has served India well in some aspects, but maybe all the regional partners may not be completely okay with the approach the BJP has been taking. BJP had all the freedom to do that because they had the numbers. So now I think there would be increased pressure on the center to satisfy all the regional partners and their wishes as well.
Shyam sir, this reminds me of the famous quote by Bill Clinton when he said, "It's all about economy, stupid." It's considered that one of the reasons for BJP not doing as well as it expected it to do is because of the rising inflation, because of unemployment, because of the alleged economic distress. My first question to you, will there be a change in the finance ministry?
I'm pretty sure there would be a thought of changing certain personnel, even including the minister, for taking care of the finance department. Reason being, the government of India's policies in terms of, let's say, controlling inflation have not led to reduction of food inflation. If you look at the food inflation rate during the first 5 years of NDA regime, the food inflation was somewhere in the range of 0.03%. Whereas in the last 5 years, the food inflation has averaged around 6%, which is much beyond the 4% target which has been set up by the government of India. And not just this. Yes, basically government of India allocating the target to Reserve Bank of India. And not just the food inflation. If you look at the important commodities within the food, that is roti, dal, etc. Even the inflation rate for many of these cereals, it has been a double digit. And for more than 30 months, the inflation rate has been above 6%. So one very important area where government would definitely be focusing upon is controlling the inflation rate. Second one is the fiscal expenditure, or in terms of, let's say, controlling fiscal deficit. So government of India's fiscal deficit target, it was basically...
We'll come to the specifics in a while. So you're saying there will be a change in the finance ministry, possibly replacing the incumbent finance minister?
I definitely foresee a change in the finance ministry.
When it comes to environment and ecology, what do you think the new government should do?
Regarding what it should do and what it would do, there is oftentimes a kind of a disconnect. But what I foresee in this case is going to be a parallel line of action when it comes to the global agenda setting. There, India is positioning itself for almost a past decade to be a leader of the global south, at least for environmental advocacy. So when it comes to issues such as green mobility, when it comes to issues such as the NDCs that India commits at the climate conferences, there we can expect India to have that aggressive stance to be maintained. But when it comes to the policy making in the domestic front, for example, the amendment to the Wildlife Act, the Forest Conservation Act, environmental impact assessment, that is where oftentimes many of these policies, it was alleged that they are being steamrolled, that proper consensus is not being built. So in those areas, I foresee a kind of a step back. I foresee a kind of a measured reaction, because that has not always benefited the public perception of the government as well. And the government would be very mindful of it, particularly in the tribal belt. And they are very sure about it, because if you take a look at the Environment Ministry and just a couple of minutes, so in the past 15 years, the Environment Ministry, how it deals with the issues, for example, for the forest, for example, for the environment impact assessment, that has taken a complete swing. Earlier, around...
Can you elaborate what swing are you talking
So, for
about?
example, in around 2010, 2011, you would oftentimes be frequented with news stories where Supreme Court would have a rap on the arms of the government that why are you holding the file for so long? Why aren't you providing environmental
That's
impact?
Supreme Court doing today as well.
But the Supreme Court today has gone to the other side, that why are you providing it in such a hurry? Examine the project. So earlier, where the Environment Ministry was seen as a kind of a final bottleneck in the infrastructure projects, in the defense projects, for example, Indian Air Force wanted to construct a forward base in northern part of West Bengal. It had to shelve that plan because environmental impact assessment was not given. Presently, Great Nicobar Islands, there the environmental impact assessment was done in such a hurry, and it is a very critical biodiversity hotspot, that eventually Madras High Court had to step in and they had to put a stop to the entire process. So from one side, where all the decisions were hung for a particular long period of time, to the other side of the swing, where every decision is being taken in like 1 week.
That's also the reason, because in a coalition government, normally you tend to see a very assertive judiciary. But if it's a majority government, there are frequent allegations of judiciary succumbing to the pressures of the executive. We'll come to that a bit later. Abhishek sir, what is your take on the election results?
I think, sir, when it comes to will the government survive with the configuration of...
No, that we all agree the government will survive. What is your take on the elections?
I think that way it strengthens democracy, because vis-a-vis what we've discussed till this point, certain sticking points were there with regards to economy, environment, and even IR. And we have proven that in that sense, our voter is very receptive to these issues. And therefore, the changed majority, not giving a full majority to the BJP itself, is an indication that we understand politics, and there are impacts to certain policies which are being followed and have been followed in that regard.
So do you think the voters have voted along these lines when it comes to matters such as environment impact assessment or inflation, or does the Indian voter cast her vote or caste her caste?
So it's not just caste, it's the fact that in the past 10 years, with a full majority, the voter has understood that giving a full majority gives too much power. So though it's a mandate for the NDA, for the BJP, the diminished mandate is to basically bring in the opposition and create proper space for opposition. Because sometimes some things need deliberation and conversation, which may not have happened previously on certain issues. So we should not see it in a negative sense with regards to the larger democratic space of India. It is a very good development with regards to the democratic space of India because now there's more space for conversation. And I was going to say this, that India is the country of unity with diversity. And this election will now strengthen diversity because all the parties specifically represent a certain cultural space. And therefore, when it comes to deliberation, these cultural spaces will have some say in that regard. So unilateral decisions may have been taken previously. And as Sir said that we had a very aggressive international relations policy, maybe there will be now deliberation, which is quite new to this government, specifically to our Prime Minister. And in that regard, there will be change overall in the basic outlook. And there has to be change because coalition politics, as you would know, sir, since the first time 1967 we had the coalition politics itself, the idea was that it was anti-Congressism at that point of time. This time the India Alliance itself was based on the idea of anti-BJPism. The
You're talking about period from 1977 onwards.
Yes, 77, but the first time we have the change in our politics with defection 67. And 77 onwards, if you look at the basic history itself, we have close to 30 years of dominant governments, close to 30 years of coalition governments. And for the Prime Minister personally, it is a space where he's not been. He's always held a full majority in that regard. And therein lies the new, what we call as space where he has to figure it out how he'll go into these waters and thereafter come on the other side also without losing his government because it is 30 seats. But it is still 30 seats.
In fact, that brings me to a question which I can ask you, that after 2 terms now, we are going to have a leader of opposition and a strong opposition party. So there, how do you see the parliamentary proceedings, particularly when it comes to the governance and the bills, as far as they are concerned?
If you look at the composition of the Lok Sabha right now, look at the composition of the Rajya Sabha as well, there will be a lot of deliberations. The government will have to anticipate the reaction to a particular bill when that is conceptualized because they don't have the majority as they had previously. So I think there will be a lot of what was missing previously, pre-legislative consultative participation. That is something that was missing that will happen now. If the news reports are true and one of the allies is hoping for a speaker's post, if that happens, that would be significant because then you won't see the parties being split because in anti-defection law, the speaker has the role to play. That is something very interesting to see. It depends upon how I've always considered that India is over-legislated and under-enforced country. It remains to be seen how these rules and regulations are enforced.
In fact, many of many of us also are not aware that why is there so much of a clamor call for the speaker's post? I mean, they are not thinking about the particular ministry, but they are after the speaker's post. Why is it so?
Imagine it this way, the TDP has 16 MPs. What if a political party decides to split this TDP and brings in what happened in Maharashtra with multiple political parties, and then the speaker will have to recognize that group as the real political party inside the Lok Sabha. So that's why the speaker's post is very, very important. And plus, let's not forget, speaker is the head of the business advisory committee. So he gets to decide who gets to speak in the parliament, for how much time. So there will be a lot of debate and dissent within the parliament, and that's how it should be. But I don't agree with one thing that the election results have told me is that exit polls are not exact polls. So that's the difference. Plus, I don't like this idea of Mr. Chandrababunaidu or Nitishkumar being called kingmakers. There are no kings and queens in a democracy. We are a democracy. They have an important role to play in government formation, but don't call them kingmakers or such sort.
So I would ask Chetan sir one question. we were talking about India and the neighborhood. This time also at the oath-taking ceremony, you have the neighboring countries being invited and they are being welcomed as well. Here there is a contentious issue with Bangladesh about the Tista water sharing.
Right.
Yeah, that's going on for so many years. now.
Since Manmohan Singh's
then
government.
UPA coalition.
So coalition government to a majority government, back to the coalition government era. We are still seeing that issue to be prevalent, and that is creating a lot of negative perception in the Bangladesh public.
relationship.
There was Mamta then, there is Mamta Banerjee.
Now as well. Yeah.
So where do
So
you
in a
see-
way, that's continuity of foreign policy as well.
So do you see these contentious issues be put on to the side?
Talking specifically about the Tista issue, water is an emotive subject. Water is the lifeline of people, right? Especially in West Bengal, Tista is critical for drinking, for irrigation, industrialization, etc.
You are a Kannadiga, so I would not discount you on that.
So, having seen the Kaveri issue here, how
Right.
it can heat up tensions between two states
Yeah.
within the country. So, imagine the impact of a transboundary river dispute. So, in West Bengal, Tista has been a political issue. It has been politicized. And I'm not naming any particular party here, be it the national parties or the regional parties. So, if you look at the UPA term, India had in a way committed to Sheikh Hasina that we will finalize the Tista agreement. In fact, the negotiations were done. This was a return favor from India because after Sheikh Hasina returned back to power in 2009, she played a critical role in putting down Northeast insurgency.
Right.
And this was India's return favor, which was supposed to be fulfilled, but the Manmohan Singh government was dragged by the politics in West Bengal. But we were wondering, every observer, every analyst, that maybe this is only because of a coalition government. But after 2014, when the Modi government came to power, India-Bangladesh relations were taken to the next level. But still the Tista issue was not resolved.
But why?
I think
The regional political pressures play a critical role in
Or BJP was eyeing a role in West Bengal.
West Bengal. Yeah, possibly.
so is it the case of the state, or is it the case where the center has to flex their muscles? What do you think is?
When it comes to foreign policy, clearly it is a union subject.
Yeah.
Governments can flex their muscles if they want to, the center can, but they are very mindful of the regional state level political consequences. And that's true when it was UPA under Congress-led coalition, possibly true under BJP-led coalition as well. And so I don't see a change over there.
So one more very simple question. With regards to European FTA,
Yeah.
the EU is asking for, and the EFTA members are also asking for diluting the labour laws. And that would have a very important impact on agriculture. And generally, agriculture is a very contagious issue within the WTO issues also.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of opinion which is building up that maybe the EFTA would be diluted because with JDU presence and Nitish presence, which is an agricultural
That is unlikely to happen, sir, because EFTA is already a commitment India has made.
Okay.
To revoke it now or to make any changes now would weaken India's position at the global level as well.
So would it slow down the FTA?
Maybe there would be an impact on the ongoing negotiations. So we are negotiating an FTA with the European Union, with UK.
Australia.
There's a full-fledged FTA we're negotiating with Australia. So there we might see an impact. But there won't be a pullback on what we have already committed.
True.
Shyam sir, one question regarding, you talked about inflation, that the food inflation has been very high. How much has that inflation been due to the rising fuel prices? And where do you see that a legroom is present for the new government to actually reduce that inflation?
So it is true that whenever you talk about inflation, one factor that generally contributes to inflation rate is the food commodity and the other one is fuel commodity. India is majorly dependent on the import of fuels. And whenever in the international market, the fuel prices will change because of either internal factors or external factors, there will be an impact in the inflation rate. Now, in recent times, no doubt, the fuel prices in the international market have cooled down. But because of the internal factors such as food prices, the inflation has been higher. Government has taken various measures, either restricting exports or making imports free of, let's say, tariffs, etc. But these, to a very great extent, have not yielded results at the ground level.
Sir, prioritizing exports of onions from Gujarat and not from Maharashtra, will that change now?
It might change looking at what has happened in the recent outcome in the election results.
Maharashtra is headed for elections.
Yes. So it might change because one of the reasons for the election outcomes is said that there was certain relaxation provided to onion exporters from Gujarat and exports were restricted from the state of Maharashtra. So this might change going forward. But having said so, definitely yes, Government of India has more of a legroom now with Reserve Bank of India providing larger, let's say, the dividend. The Government of India has more legroom to provide more, let's say, supporting services in the form of, let's say, Bharat Atta or onion prices or onion being sold at a lower prices or conducting open market sales operations, etc. They might continue, ramp it up to cool down the prices in the coming
in
years.
a way, you are foreseeing a rise in revenue expenditure?
That is expected. That is
So the
expected.
primary deficit is going to be like very large.
So the primary deficit may or may not go up, but definitely yes, the fiscal deficit might go up in the coming, let's say, upcoming budget.
Sir,
One big demand from Andhra Pradesh has been for the special category status.
Yes.
So with TDP being a critical coalition partner,
Yeah.
what do you think?
But the important thing is, sorry to interrupt you, this is a different phase of politics right now. Because imagine, till 2024, it was viewed that we have a government at the center, which has been elected by the people from North India. Because BJP as a political party was seen non-existent in South India, except with a significant presence in Karnataka. But now you have two major allies of the government, one from North, one from South. So maybe for the first time, you see a South Indian or a state from South India being represented in the parliament in the last 10 decades in the government. Now that will have an impact on delimitation.
Yeah.
Will delimitation happen in 26 or not? I seriously doubt. Even if it will happen, but then maybe population will not be the only criteria to assign more seats in Lok Sabha. Similarly, when it comes to Finance Commission, so there was a lot of allegation against the recommendations of the Finance Commission, taking only population as a criteria, which was benefiting the northern states. Now we will see a twist there, a significant shift there. That speaks larger of federalism in India.
Yes.
And what about the office of the governor?
That is where I see significant changes in a sense that you will not see governors now interfering with the democratically elected chief ministers in the way that they have used to be. But let's be honest, there have been allegations of partisanship when it comes to governors in the opposition ruled states. Now will the government need to consult allies to appoint a governor to a state? Maybe no. But will these governors play a partisan role and do the bidding of New Delhi in the state capitals? I seriously doubt that will happen.
But haven't we seen instances of this happening before as well under previous coalition governments?
Yes.
Where the governor would still be partisan?
But then you will not see this happening in a state as rampant as we saw previously.
In Maharashtra, for example.
So what would change? Why? Because my understanding is that no doubt BJP has not got the majority, but definitely yes, they have got let's say two strong allies. So even with the strong
And these
allies,
two strong allies, very good, but they are known to be mavericks in that sense. Paltu Kumar, as the name is called, so he can switch this way or the other way. So the BJP will be wary of him. And also Mr. Chandrababunaidu, till recently he was part of the India bloc, in a sense he was part of the opposition. And he fought a lot to bring BJP to its side. And some would say he almost begged for an alliance with the BJP. But he was the one who called Mr. Modi a dictator in the run-up to 2019 elections. So whether you can trust these allies, as a BJP person, if I was the BJP person, I would reconsider twice before taking such decisions.
Sir, what's your opinion about the caste census? So they'll go forward with the caste census, which was replicated in Bihar.
More than caste census, we need to look at whether, if news reports are true, whether Mr. Nitishkumar is insisting on a common minimum program. So that common minimum program will tell us a lot about what is the priority of this government. And let's recall what Prime Minister Modi said at the NDA meeting when he was elected as the leader of the NDA. He kissed the book of the constitution. He spoke of getting along with all the regional state governments. He spoke of diversity as well. So that these are clear early indications of where this government is headed.
And on a lighter note,
which is based on consensus.
Even the normal census has not been conducted.
Which I was going to
For a long time.
say. The main census has not happened. Sir, I'm going to ask you a question which every
That
Indian...
is maybe because...
COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sabath sir, you are from Kashmir. What do you foresee for Kashmir? Will it get statehood?
No comments.
So I was going to ask you a question which every Indian is going to ask you. Will they now do something about the tax rates or taxation?
Sir, in the earlier coalition...
You're asking for yourself, sir?
No, I'm
sure.
For every Indian is asking you this, sir.
No doubt, in the earlier coalition governments, there have been instances where the governments have reduced the taxation.
Dream budget
Yes.
of 1991.
Chidambaram.
Or Mr. Chidambaram's budget of 97?
Yes,
97?
97. So earlier, there have been instances, even when we had a coalition government, because there have been, let's say, certain sections of media where they're talking whether the government policies will be, let's say, delayed, or will there be any, let's say, reduction in the effectiveness of the policies. We have seen earlier instances where coalition governments, best example, 1991, the Narasimha Rao government, which implemented one of the most important reforms post
But that was not a coalition government. That was basically a minority government.
Let's take 96, 98 government, or let's say AB Vajpayee government. So we have seen multiple coalition governments which have
For a common
implemented-
man, not Aam Aadmi, for a common man, aren't coalition governments better than a full-fledged majority governments?
In a sense, yes, because there will be multiple, let's say, components in a coalition government. Every political party has to take care of its voters, or let's say at least the state.
So
And in the
basically
process
more
of-
challenge to political parties to manage their allies, but relief for the
While we are
armed
talking
janata.
about coalition, we have to be mindful of the fact that amongst the coalition governments, this is the coalition government with the largest number of seats for a single party. The previous coalition governments that we had, where the main pole of the coalition, they were considerably weaker. Here you have an incumbent who has already spent 10 years and is still the largest, and so they will call the shots. So when it comes to the tax rates, I'm not sure that they would lower the tax rates, because as we already discussed, they need leg room in order to carry out that welfareism policy.
So more welfareism would require more revenue
Yes.
that will not be compensated by the
By the
RBI
tax.
dividend. So they need more.
Sir, but I'll ask you the same question you asked Sham, sir. Are coalition governments better for democracy and generally?
I would say, in a sense, yes. The decision making may get delayed, but look at it this way. Till 2024 also, we saw as if we were not in a parliamentary democracy, we were running a presidential form of democracy, where there were two people competing with each other, and one would get the vote and would be proclaimed as the leader of India. Regional political parties, I would say whenever regional political parties get representation, federalism gets strengthened and democracy would get strengthened. In that way, I think we are better off with coalition governments than with majority governments.
Just to add
My
to the
personal
point,
take on this matter.
earlier Mukesh sir was talking about, let's say, the one political party calling a shot. I just have a difference of opinion here. No doubt, one single party has a lot of, let's say, seats. But if you see the history, earlier if you look at these two allies, there have been instances where the same two allies have walked out of coalition. Basically pulling down the existing government. For example, the TDP party, it was a part of the earlier government. It walked out of the earlier government because the special category status demand for
But
Andhra
that
Pradesh-
did not threaten
Sir,
the
but then
stability
we
of the
also
government.
presume
but that was a different situation.
The best example of that would be what late J. Jalandhar did.
But like I said, earlier they had more than, let's say, the minimum number of seats that were required.
So there, something associated with economy, which the states are truly up against, is inclusion of fuel under GST. First of all, I want to understand from you whether that should be done, whether that is beneficial in the long run or not, and in the present circumstance, is that a possibility that
I will tell you what Shamsar would answer. It should be done, but it can't be done.
Yes, if you talk about GST, we do not have a GST rate on fuel products. Should it be done? Definitely yes. Because we cannot have a situation where all the other commodities we have a GST and we will have, let's say, a different tax rate, center as well as state for fuel commodities. But having said so, the issue here is much more complicated. Right now, on the fuel, the taxes that are imposed by the both center as well as state are very, very high. And the highest GST rate that we have right now is 28%. So if you basically bring this particular fuel under GST rate, maximum that we can collect is 28. That will basically lead to a lot of loss of revenues for both center as well as.
But won't it be a lifeline for industries such as aviation, which is bleeding day in and day out because of the high taxation on the fuel?
Yes, it will be a lifeline, but you will have to look at a larger context. What about the government finances? Government of India wants to cut down the revenue deficit as well as the fiscal deficit. And if you look at how much does the excise duty actually contribute, the contribution is very, very high. Not only for the center, even for the states.
Sir, would we see more of populist schemes with the coalition government?
That is definitely expected. Definitely expected. Like I already mentioned, the government of India has received a huge amount of the dividend from the Reserve Bank of India.
And it's not only because of that. If you look at the voting pattern, in all the states where there are populist schemes,
Where Congress had promised.
for example, Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi, the Congress promises in Karnataka, Lakpati Didi was announced by the BJP. There's a scheme in West Bengal.
In Madhya Pradesh as well. In Madhya Pradesh also.
In Rajasthan,
Ladli Behna scheme in Madhya Pradesh as well.
Especially
So
now,
all these schemes, they do work. They have a connect with the voter. And I think what we have witnessed, that's for the experts to analyze much better. There is an increase in the number of voters, increase in the voting percentage by women, which speaks of migration, interstate migration. And this women has been viewed as a vote bank by various political parties, targeting schemes specifically to women, which is not bad, but it has been cultivated like a vote bank. And that pays dividends. For example, in Madhya Pradesh for the BJP, in West Bengal for the Trinamool Congress. That's something that I think will continue. So you will have a lot of schemes, although the Prime Minister would talk about Revdis. But these are the schemes which ultimately benefit the poor or benefit the wider population.
You see the assembly elections of Karnataka as well.
Yeah, because of the 5 promises.
just to add to the point, even one of the reasons why TDP won a huge majority for the state government was they announced a lot of welfare schemes. They announced 30,000 rupees per annum for the farmers. 3,000 rupees for unemployed population.
But why did the Congress lose if they promised 1 lakh per woman per annum?
That is, multiple reasons have contributed.
So there are
to the
multiple
loss.
reasons that play on the minds of the voter
Yes.
before he decides to cast his vote.
So I'll ask you a counterfactual question. It's an interesting one.
He's not giving the UPSC anything.
But we tend to presume that, as Sir said, that it's 232 seats, 234 seats, and he only needs 30 seats. We tend to presume the strength of India alliance being very strong, that they will remain within they are. Can there be a case where both the allies leave the NDA and the BJP is in a position to pick and choose from the India alliance to then hold the government itself?
What my understanding tells me that should a situation like this arise, BJP won't regret it. They would be on their feet and would call up a snap poll immediately, because for a lot of the commentators and amongst the internal rumblings also, they have a finger pointed at the low voter turnout, because what was the mobilization that they expected of the voters, that did not happen. So maybe this time in a winter season, we might see an election campaigning so that heat wave is not blamed at. But
Also, maybe after a few months of seeing the pulls and pressures of coalition, people would be frustrated with a weaker coalition government.
What we saw with Atal Bihari Vajpayee government, that might be repeated. But here I would ask a question from you. Prior to the election and during this electioneering process, I mean for the past 3 months almost, there has been a lot of narrative, a lot of various articles written about the health of Indian democracy. I mean, more than what we worry about Indian democracy, there have been foreign newspapers, etc. At the end of it all, now that we are able to see the result and hindsight as our teacher, what do you think is the state, health, electioneering process, EVM, everything?
We were a democracy before these elections. We continue as a democracy, a vibrant, flourishing democracy, a thriving democracy. No questions about that. Because let's not forget the significance of this. The transfer of power in India has always been smooth.
Very smooth,
Unlike Pakistan, unlike other democracies or so-called
Even
democracies.
United States.
United States. So before lecturing India on its democratic credentials, I think these countries should look into the mirror. But having said that, there are serious question marks on the functioning of Election Commission of India. I would not go into whether EVMs can be hacked or not. I personally feel that EVMs cannot be hacked. But the data, the voter turnout data, which got delayed this time, unusual delays, that puts a question mark on the way Election Commission is functioning. There were a series of statements made by the Honorable Prime Minister in Rajasthan, for which instead of him getting the notice for violation of Model Code of Conduct, his party president got the notice. So that speaks volumes about the conduct of Election Commission. And let's not forget, this is the same Election Commission which would be invited as observers in elections to other countries, be it Nepal, be it Sri Lanka. That's for the Election Commission to answer, but there have been serious question marks.
In fact, the way Guardian and BBC, they have been reporting, you have to understand that in UK, for example, they can't even remember the last time they voted for their Prime Minister. They vote for the best restaurants more frequently than they vote for the Prime Minister. And for them to raise a question on how the democracy functions and how democracy is crumbling in India.
So the counting day was on the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square incident in China.
Yes.
So what Russia is right now.
You brought the history element here.
Yes,
I have to say. So that way, we are a very healthy democracy. There have been questions, as you said. But vis-a-vis looking at the other geopolitical, the Americans are the best example.
And also, I would correct myself now. We should not also be comparing with others. We need to compare with our past. We were a democracy, we are a democracy, but every day we need to ensure that we are a better version of Indian democracy.
And also this election, social media influencers have played a quite significant role. But do you think it has played a decisive role, or?
You never know it now unless and until you have some data to back it up. But there has been a significant yes.
Personally, I believe that these influencers, etc.,
influence you.
They will have some amount of nudge that they can, but the Indian voter is very clear in their mind that why they are voting for someone or why they are not voting for someone.
Maybe especially the indecisive voters.
Yeah, but that indecisive voter, because if you take a look at the vote percentage, the vote percentage of the ruling party has increased this time. Regardless of the number of seats,
the the number has gone down by 0.7%.
0.7%. But largely it is still in the similar ballpark if you will take a look at that. So influencers can have a limited reach, particularly in the smartphone generation, but the rural votes, which have mattered significantly, I don't think there.
So at the end of the day, it's roti, kapda, makan.
Yes.
Nothing
But
else.
I think along with, let's say, looking at only the young generation, or let's say the generation which is used to getting, let's say, news through digital media, I think there has been some influence because of the misinformation as well. Right, regarding a particular party, their policies have been miscommunicated or purposely, highlighted in a wrong way.
So why do you think the BJP got less than what it expected, 370?
So there are multiple reasons. Like I said, one being involved in the economics, I generally feel
They're also economics.
Yes. I'm not an expert in other areas.
Started with it's the economy thing.
So it's economy stupid. So I feel there have been certain issues. For example, unemployment rate. There have been various surveys which have been conducted. Which
did Agniveer play a role?
I definitely
should there be a rethink on this policy?
Definitely, yes. I'm of the strong opinion that there should be a reworking of this particular scheme. As such, in rural parts of India,
no, vehemently no.
Why?
Average age of Indian Army is around 33 years. In the modern era, you need a young armed force. The tooth-to-tail ratio that you have in the Indian Army is simply unacceptable. The revenue, the expenditure that you have in pensions. I mean, the defense forces, they get allocated a particular budget, and that budget is to equip them. But the majority of that budget is for the pension, the salaries, etc.
But what if I'm an Agniveer? Why would I risk my life if I know that I will retire at the age of 25?
So that brings up a kind of a preconceived notion that you are risking your life only because you have a permanent job. Someone who is in the armed forces, they don't risk their lives because of the job that they have. They risk their lives for the belief that they have. And
why did you join the army?
I was not fit enough. I had.
You are fit.
So then basically it means you're basically providing certain skill sets to certain population which you're going to use it for a specific number of years. Is it not a wasteful expenditure?
No.
In that way, let's say one answer to increase our, let's say...
Sir, NG Narega, is that a wasteful scheme or that's a good scheme?
That's a good scheme, assuming we are going to implement it in a very right way.
You are being paid for unskilled labor.
Yeah.
That is because the population which is there in the rural part of India, most of it is unskilled. We want to move it away from gathering or let's say crowding into agriculture.
I'm not doubting the scheme, I'm just playing a devil's advocate.
Yeah. So my argument is simple. We are spending amount of money. We should provide the labor for a longer duration. Let's not create unemployment after a certain number of years. The basic issue.
Prioritize them with skill development so that they are.
This is where I feel that our perception regarding what the armed forces are, that needs to change. Our perception, which has been built up, is that armed forces means a sarkari naukri, where you have a fixed tenure, but you have to understand that tomorrow, if push comes to shove, if let's suppose there's a war, you cannot expect 4 lakh people running down. I mean, that is not how the modern warfares are done. Take a look at the contemporary wars going anywhere around the world, be it Armenia, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Russia, be it Israel, anywhere. Technology plays a factor. It is not the sheer number. Indian armed forces, roughly, they provide employment to around 14 lakh people. Imagine those 14 lakh salaries, imagine the upkeep, imagine the residential aspect, imagine the pension. They don't have money till now. Many of the programs of the Indian Armed Forces are severely underfunded. For example, when we talk about the submarine force that India should have developed around a decade back, it was underfunded. When we talk about the drone program. So this is the technological front where we need to invest as much, because in our exact neighborhood that is happening. China is developing its technology at a very significant lightning speed. And if we cannot match up a technological prowess by simply saying that we have so many numbers of armed forces personnel, so everything is taken care of. We have to prepare our armed forces, a young force. Now, it is not as if after a 4-year service, nobody remains in the service. You still have a proficiency level where certain number of people will be there in the service. Those who sadly are not able to retain their post, they would have acquired a skill and experience which no other sector of the country would have provided them.
If there is a rethink on Agniveer and maybe the old pension scheme is brought back, that would be disastrous for the economy?
Yes. For a very simple reason.
But that would be the biggest vote puller as well?
It will be our biggest, let's say, vote puller. It will also be one of the biggest expenditures that we'll have to provide for. That is one of the reasons why we shifted from the old pension scheme to the new pension scheme, where there is a contribution from both the sides.
So if you're always talking about, let me play a devil's advocate here, you're always talking about how do we conserve money and spend it on skill development, infrastructure, capital assets, so on and so forth. How do you then explain the tax breaks given to the corporates?
The original idea behind giving a tax break back in the year 2019.
That is the presented idea that it will lead to employment. But the hidden agenda is something else. Maybe electoral bonds.
There might be, I don't know. But has it, I'll basically tell you the answer that was given by Reserve Bank of India. Has it actually led to increased growth or increased industrialization in India? RBI says no. Reason being, many of these companies which got a tax break when Government of India reduced it from 30% to 22%, they've used the money to repay their debt rather than reinvesting in the market. So in that particular area, again, there's a discussion, should we introduce inheritance tax? There are areas where we can increase our tax receipts and we can use it. Like Mukesh sir said, I agree in that particular argument that we need to invest a lot of money in research and development. Hardly around 1% of the GDP that we spend in the research and development, and most of it comes from the government-owned companies. Sector, We need a lot of R&D from the private sector. And that is where the government can provide, let's say, certain tax breaks. Again, going back to that tax break. So, in order to attract a lot of investment in research and development.
Shyam sir, what do you think the impact of farm laws, the farm protests was? Because if you look at Punjab, Haryana belt, the voting pattern has clearly shown a tilt.
Definitely, yes. There was certain impact. In fact, even one of the MPs was very recently slapped because of that. So argument is, was there an impact? Definitely yes. Certain regions, certain pockets which have been severely been affected.
But Punjab, because of only farm laws, Punjab by its very history, it goes against the wind. It may not only be because of the farm laws. But even if without farm laws, maybe the government would not have got many seats.
Not just farm laws, but one of the factors that has contributed is a farm law.
Everybody is lobbing full tosses to Shyam sir, so let me put him in a fake.
No, I want to ask, because we are talking about Punjab, then sir, what is the implication of Agnipath Singh getting elected with vis-a-vis the internal security of India generally?
Because if we take the revival of the Khalistan movement, which we have seen not just in India but abroad as well, initially the analysts, experts, they were simplifying it, saying that this is largely a abroad phenomenon happening only amongst the diaspora.
True.
But it was Amritpal Singh who symbolized the revival of Khalistan movement with leading Waris Punjab Day over the last one and a half years. So his election, right, when he is in custody, charged under UAPA, it is definitely going to have some security.
And same in the case of Kashmir, with Engineer Rashid getting
That's quite
elected.
unprecedented.
Yeah, so what do you think will be the implication in Jammu Kashmir, and especially when it comes to providing statehood? So I would first, and I would need your opinion as well. So what do you think?
Sir has already answered that question.
No comment.
With no comment answer.
So what do you think will be the implication on
With regard
that?
to security, if you're looking
What if the
specifically
government needs these two MPs and releases them and gets their support?
what if they get
That is a
convicted
good
and
subject
get
for a
disqualified?
That
new
would
book
really be
by
unprecedented.
A.S. Dullat maybe, or
Yeah, if they get convicted, then they lose their seat.
So I'll ask one last question to everybody, and a very important one. What is your wish list for this government? I'll start with you, and then we all can give us. If the government is listening to us, this is the wish list from the educators of Unacademy. Sabath sir.
Let's start with you.
Okay, you put me on the spot.
And you agree.
Well, first, strengthen democracy. Second,
My God.
a little bit higher allocation to the Ministry of Culture.
just because you take the subject.
That is no, because protecting culture is very important. That way, there is a lot of intangible, tangible heritage, which is basically part of the narrative itself, and we are losing out a lot of. In COVID-19 and thereafter, a lot of sectors actually come back. But the intangible heritage-based artisans and even the people who represent our performative art, they have not recovered. True. And therefore, we should not forget that what makes India is India's diversity, its culture. We are a very, very rich civilization, and democracy is a part of it. From Sabha Samiti Vidata to today, what has happened, we are actually the most vibrant and the biggest democracy in the world. So the first wish list is that we need to strengthen democracy. Second is a little bit more attention.
How can you elaborate on this? How do you want the government to strengthen democracy?
So strengthening democracy would mean that firstly deliberation, and the number of MPs expelled out of the parliament, that is quite high. Parliament was never for just passing laws, it was about deliberation, and representative government and deliberative government needs the parliament. We need the Atal Bihari Vajpayee's and the Lalu Prasad Yadav's giving those moments within the parliament which have not been there. We tend to see the data that these many people have been expelled.
So you want stand-up comedy in parliament?
Sure, sir. Maybe that is what India needs. We need inspiration. And that inspiration will come from the parliament, because at the end of the day, my MP represents me. And therefore, strengthening democracy is deliberative democracy, make it more representative. And the second wish list is, I asked the question to Shyam sir also, little bit of tax breaks. Not just to me, but to everyone. And I would say that I think
You're not thinking about the nation. You're thinking about yourself.
Everybody wants to say, but
In
nobody
every wish list, there's
Tax Ministry of Culture, tax break.
And I'll say one more thing, sir, which is that I think that was in the foreign sector, we don't need too much difference. So the wish list is not to do anything to Jaishankar. Jaishankar, I think, has done a very beautiful, very
same with Mr. Nitin Gadkari.
Yes. The roads of India, the way we are developing with regards to that infrastructure.
Same with Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman.
Answered already.
So that way, strengthen democracy, make it more representative, need a little bit of allocation to culture. Cultural space need to be protected. With a coalition government, automatically all cultural spaces come into the context. And last but not the least, in the economic sphere, we need more jobs, and demographic dividend is being wasted to some level. be it Agniveer, be it other schemes, we need a solid plan. Skill development did not work, Skill India did not work, and just ITI based vocational training is not something which is skilling. And there's a saying in labor history, all labor is skilled, there's nothing called unskilled labor, because even balancing that tasla on the head is a skill in that regard. So maybe we need a economic plan, because a lot of conversation has been about economics, an economic plan which can take India forward, but with everybody having the right representation and right space.
This is not a list anymore. This is a book.
So my wish list started with representative democracy. I want India's democracy to be strengthened.
This is democracy, when you wish something from the government.
Which is true. The fact that we can say something like this today is the beauty of Indian democracy, the fundamental rights and the federal structure. So, same question to you.
First, Chetan sir.
Okay, I'll keep it very short, unlike Abhishek. 3 wishes. 1, more deliberation within the parliament. Because the last 10 years, we have seen laws being bulldozed through. No deliberation, no debates. We have a stronger opposition, which is great for the democracy, for the parliament itself. So that is one thing which I would like to see. Second, ensure that the hate in general, the polarization which has increased, not just from one party, but in general, there has been a greater amount of polarization on various lines of division, from religion to caste. So toning down of the political polarization, and I think a coalition government is good for that. And finally, utilize the demographic dividend. We are in a sweet spot right now. We miss this opportunity, then I think that would be the biggest loss. If we capitalize on that, the next 3-4 decades, India can own this. We can dominate the world.
Chand sir.
I'll not repeat what has been said already. One, I want the government to put a control on freebies. Not just the central government, even for the state governments. We should have a policy wherein
How do you define a freebie?
Freebie is a very subjective term. What is a freebie for me may not be a freebie for you.
Right.
That's the reason there was one recommendation which basically stated whenever any political party announces a freebie, let them give information regarding the freebies.
The
For
financial
example,
implications of
yes. What are the sources from where they are able to, or where they are targeting the revenue for this? What would be the impact of that on the revenue
This matter
deficit?
is pending before the
Fiscal
Supreme Court
deficit.
as well.
Yes. So we should put certain limits on the freebies, right? Because many of the freebies are not productive. Second, I want government to do something for the agriculture sector. Despite, let's say,
Doubling
so many
farmers'
decades.
income.
Yes, doubling the farmers' income was announced. We have not been able to achieve that. And even we have stopped counting the number of farmer suicides. So there should be certain reforms to address the issues of the farmers. Third one, I want the government to control inflation rate, especially the food inflation.
Everything related to economy.
Yes, that's the reason I said I'll not be repeating whatever has been said already.
So
of
you
course, I
agree
also
with
want.
his wish list.
I also want. Let's say
is a wish
strengthening
He
of the
wants that
democracy.
answer. He's not saying
a
it.
wish book.
That is a wish book. Everything will be included within that itself.
So these are the basic things. Apart from that, I want, let's say, increased manufacturing activity. We are missing the bus
Again,
on
economy.
yes, integrating into global manufacturing chains. I want something to be done there. Something in regards to the free trade agreements, which government has already announced. So I'll stick to economics. In addition to their wish list, this is my wish list.
Mukesh sir.
In my case, I would repeat one thing that Chetan sir said, and that is parliamentary deliberations. That has been seriously lacking for the past 10 years. That needs to be revived when it comes to deliberations for the passing of bills, etc. Secondly, infrastructure. We have picked up pace, but we have a lot of catching up to do. So there needs to be a kind of quick decision making in terms of many of the major infrastructure services. Agricultural reforms are required. Just saying that doubling the income, that is again a vague term. So it is like the government should do something for the country. Fair enough, but how do you double the income? So for that, for example, essential commodities. So creation of the storage spaces. That is something which is essential. That will help in, I think, curbing the food inflation as well. That being taken, and because everybody is handling about their own subject, so I will plug in environment as well. So when it comes to some of the very critical habitats, some of the very critical ecosystems, the decisions have been taken in quite a rush. Those are very vital decisions though, but before that, the government has to take the local community, the forest dwellers, into confidence And after that, maybe even for the displaced wildlife, have an alternative. This is not simply certain blocks that you are putting from here to here. You need to be mindful of the forest submerged, the forest lands taken in. So there I would wish the government to be a bit more cautious, but decisive at the same time, not like the previous era.
So do you wish the government to introduce the land acquisition bill, which was earlier introduced?
I will choose the option that he did.
So the Great Nicobar project, should they take it back?
They should. They should carry on with that project because it is very important when it comes to defense and when it also comes to development of a transshipment hub in that area, very close to the Strait of Malacca, which is a choke point. So it is important. But the concerns with regards to the national park in that region, for example, even for the hatching of the leatherback turtles. So there an alternative arrangement, let's say a nearby island, needs to be sanitized for that. Wildlife will automatically find their own space, provided you give them that space.
But then is Campa is also a problem with regards to these things? The way Campa is actually...
It is always a problem. Because
Campa Cola has now been acquired by
compulsory deforestation.
There are no, I teach politics.
Yes.
That was introduced as a financial bill.
Yes.
Do you know that?
I know.
So now that all of us have basically listed all the wish list, Abhishek sir has written a book about the wish list. So what is your wish list for this?
To quote Faiz Ahmad Faiz, "Mujhse pehli si mohabbat mere mehboob na mang." I don't have a wish list.
But that is too safe. Don't play safe in this case. Yes.
No,
Just like the question on Jammu and
Kashmir, no comments.
The wish list would be spending more on education. I think we need to surpass 6% of the GDP on education. We need to spend more. The government should spend more on health. And I think I'm a firm believer of freedom of speech and expression, but I think the blazing hate coming from the news studios, there should be some regulation of some sort on these television channels and the kind of debates that they run every 9 o'clock, which I think the nation does not want to participate in. Plus, the government should stop interfering in the personal lives of the people, what they eat, what they drink, who they sleep with. That's none of the business of the government.
Absolutely.
You all agree with me?
Yes.
If you have agreed with the discussion that we have had today, please support us by liking the video, share this video with your friends and fellow aspirants, and thank you so much for participating in this podcast. All the best.